In my 20s, I got to know Richard Chase, one of America's greatest folk story collectors. He's known for collecting the Jack Tales. Most of us grew up knowing Jack and the Bean Stalk, but that's really the only Jack story that most of us know. There were many stories that were told through the Appalachians and the Ozarks, but many of us would be surprised to know that these actually came from Britain and were handed down orally all through the mountains and the valleys for many, many generations. And the stories didn't change much, except the character Jack did. The story that I'm about to tell you, I've had a hard time placing because today when I went to look for Richard Chase's book, I couldn't find it on my shelf. And when I went out online to try and find some type of notation on this story, I couldn't find it either. So I intend to tell this story because I know it is an oral story and I've heard it before, so we're just going to have to simply go by my memory. It's called Jack and the Bag of Death, and it goes, Jack woke up. He woke up under the tree he remembers going to sleep under, and he looks around himself, and everything's the same. Nothing's changed. And he looks up in the tree, and he sees that bag where he put it there, and he remembers where he is. Jack is an old man. A very, very old man. And he gets up, and his bones ache, and his bones creak, and all around him, everything is old. And he walks down the hill to the village where everything is old. And he is amazed because he's probably been asleep for 20 or 30 years, but there's his house, and there coming to meet him is his old dog, and it's still alive. And how can this be? I'll tell you. About 30 years ago, he and Death sat down to play a round of cards. And after many, many rounds, and many, many rounds of drink, he bet Death that he couldn't get inside a bag. And Death said, "Why, yes, I can." And Jack said, "I bet you won't fit in there." And Death said, "There is not a place in this world that I can't fit." And Jack said, "Bet you can't fit in that bag." And Death said, "I bet I can." And so he gets inside the bag, and Jack reaches over, and he ties a knot in that bag, and he slings it over his shoulder, and he starts off. And he goes up the hill, and he flings that bag up into the top of that big old tree. And you know, for a while, everything was great. People didn't get old. Babies were still born. Crops were still raised. But after a while, people started complaining because it didn't matter how many birthdays came and went. Nobody died. It didn't matter how sick you got. Nobody died. After a few years, Jack began to wonder about his wisdom in tricking Death in that bag. But he didn't quite know what to do. If you let Death out of that bag all at once, well, that'd be a big mess. So he really was kind of stuck at what to do. So he got down on his knees and he began to pray. He said, "What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do?" And one of the angels heard him, and he looked down and he said, "Jack, look at my heart. it's got rusted strings. Because we haven't played anybody into heaven nigh on 30 years. There's only one thing you can do. You've got to climb that tree and let death out of that bag. But Jack thought about it, and how much good he had done for the world by taking away death. He had done a lot of good. It didn't matter how many wars were fought, there weren't any deaths. It didn't matter how many plagues there wasn't any death. But the world just kept filling up and filling up with people who were getting older. So he was kind of stuck. And that's why he'd gone to sleep. He just laid down and decided he'd take a nap and think about it. But Jack woke up. And he looked around him. And everything was old. Old, old, old. His old dog could barely make it around. There was no dying for it. There was no mercy killing for it. So finally, Jack, with a sigh, climbs the tree, and he takes down that bag, and he unties that knot, and Death, with a gentle touch, says, "Jack, are you ready to go?" And Jack says, "Yes, I am." So with a gentle touch, Jack and Death became friends again. And all the world went back to normal. And there became dead people, and people being born, and the cycle started over again. There's no moral to this story, except you can't avoid death. It's an interesting story, though. Richard Chase was an interesting guy. He tramped a lot of Appalachia to collect these stories. Jack was every man. We talk a lot about saving lives, and we talk about making our lives longer. And I guess what I'm saying to you is we have to learn to live each day as it is. Because one day, death is going to make friends with us. And we'll go up or out. And that'll be the end. That is the end. Bye now.